Okay, so we are going to be beginning our final watercolor painting, and today we're going to talk about choice and how to successfully choose a photo for your final project. So this will be the final painting that we do. You have 2 weeks to work on it, and you get to choose what you paint for your final painting. We have painted in class every common theme in painting. So we have painted, if you think back, we've painted abstracts, we've painted landscapes, we've painted still lifes, we've painted portraits. And those, pretty much any painting or piece of artwork that you look at would fall into one or more of those categories. So you may choose to paint a still life, which is painting objects. So if you would want to paint like a motorcycle, that would count as a still life. A landscape or a cityscape, which is when we paint outside to show distance. Or a portrait. That portrait can be human or animal or insect. You will need to work from at least one reference photo. And the goal when we're making these paintings is to paint something that you find interesting. So you're not just painting something random or painting something that because you think it's going to be easy, but instead you are painting something that you like, that you want a painting of. Because we're going to be working from photographs, it's important for us to talk about copyright. We cannot just go to Google and put in what we want to paint. The people who post those images, that image belongs to them. It belongs to the person who took their photograph, who took the photo. And making it a painting is not enough for you to transform it into a new use. So we have to talk about where you get your photographs to paint from. The best choice for a photo reference is your own personal photo. So something that you've taken a photo of using your cell phone. We take pictures of stuff all the time that we want to remember. We take pictures of things that we find important or interesting, and those photographs will make great, personally relevant paintings to you. Second choices are copyright-free websites. And those copyright-free websites that you can use are Morguefile and Pixabay. When we pick a photo, it's important for us to pick a photograph that we're going to be able to make a good painting from. So we need to make sure we have what we call a focal point. A focal point is also called an area of interest. We also want a variety of shapes and values that will be interesting to our viewer. Basically, I'm telling you that you should have a reason that you chose to make this photograph into a painting. You are not choosing the photo because you think it looks like it will be easy to paint. I have discovered that two things happen when you pick something that you think looks easy. When you pick something that looks easy, a lot of times the objects are overly simple, and any mistake will stand out really, really magnified. And the other thing is like when you have the mindset of I'm choosing this because it's easy, you think it's going to be easy, and no painting is easy. We have to work to make any painting happen. And so you don't want to set yourself up for failure by choosing because it's easy. Choose because you want this as a painting. The objects that are in your photo should have a relationship to each other and to the background. And then it's always important that we remember that we are creating a painting from a photo reference. We are not trying to recreate a photo. Some photos will not make good paintings. We have to remember that photography is an art form on its own. And some photos just really are great photos, and they're never going to make a good painting. So you do have to kind of be thinking ahead to when you look for your photograph, how can I make it be a painting? What am I going to do to change it to make it be a painting? And that's kind of a good mindset to have while you're looking for an image. We also want to think about making sure that we're using the entire page of our painting. So you A lot of times we tell people to think about the rule of thirds. So if you think about like your camera, it has this grid in there, and that is so that you can compose a good photograph. We find images that have everything just right in the middle to be kind of boring looking. And instead, we tend to aim to have our focal point fall on those 1/3 marks, either 1/3 vertically, 1/3 horizontally, or we really like for things to fall where those lines meet. So it can be an easy way for you to kind of restructure or recompose your photo. I always recommend that you take a photo and then crop it, and so you can kind of control that composition. We also want to think about having a composition that is dynamic, that's interesting, right? And so most of the time we find photographs that have asymmetrical balance, which means things are not right in the middle and they're not the same on the right side and the left side, to be more exciting. So you can see that this image, this little illustration of a bird on a branch, goes diagonally through the picture plane, which we find more exciting than straight up and down or straight sideways. And that the focal point, that bird, sits right on those third marks. So if we think about the rule of thirds and using the rule of thirds, we can definitely see that this layout or this composition would apply to that rule. We also want to make sure that we're choosing a photo that has an interesting focal area. So if I imagine that I want to paint sunflowers, I can find photos that are a little too simple and will make kind of a boring looking painting, like the one on the left, right? It's in the middle. I'm not really showing that I understand what the rule of thirds is or the importance of it at all. There's not a lot going on. The shapes are pretty simple. The second image is better by far. It's not super fantastic, but it would be a better painting. It does show that I understand the rule of thirds because that line of daisies sits right at about that line of thirds. The stem and the glass sit vertically where the third would be, and so that's definitely acknowledging that I understand the rule of thirds and the importance that that plays in choosing a photo, but it just still has kind of a lot of just empty white space. So if I'm thinking about sunflowers, I might want to think about something like this, like thinking about having flowers in a vase. They're multiple flowers. It's got a good focal area. Interesting shapes. They're not too busy. Okay, so thinking about the composition as a whole is a good thing to do. At the same time, I want to avoid something that feels too complex, because remember, we are making a painting. So if I find this photograph and I say, yes, this is fantastic, we painted those sunsetty skies back when we did landscapes and all these sunflowers, it's going to be fantastic. I have to think about, how am I going to paint this? Now, I can imagine painting the sky, because we did paint skies like that, smaller, but we did paint skies like that when we painted landscapes. So, okay, I have a plan for how to paint the sky. But when I start to realistically think about painting those sunflowers at the bottom of my image, all of a sudden I don't have a plan for how to successfully paint 1,250 sunflowers in a field and all of those leaves and stems. It just doesn't make sense to me when I'm thinking about trying to make that happen in watercolor. So you do have to avoid photos that are going to be too busy. If I can't imagine a way to paint it, it's probably going to be too difficult to turn that photograph into a painting. So we do need to avoid things that are too busy or too complex to be successful with. We also need to avoid things that are too simple, right? This is an image of what I call a floating flower. Floating flowers do not make good paintings, okay? Because they are, at one hand, too complex. Like, look at all those little tiny details in the center of that flower, and they're too simple because we have those giant petals and the shadows on those petals, and if I don't get those just right, there isn't anything else going on in that painting. My painting will just automatically be kind of awkward and strange. If you want to choose a flower, choose flowers in a scene, choose flowers with some butterflies, choose flowers in a vase, choose flowers that have something else going on and not just a giant close-up of a flower. You may not paint a sunset. There is nothing going on there except for a fancy sky, right? So if I want to paint a sunset, that's great, but I need to add a sunset sky into a landscape or scene. I may not just paint that sunset with nothing else there. There is no focal point there. There's nothing for me to look at other than just the sky. And just a sky is a fantastic photograph, but it is not a fantastic painting. So I could draw, or I could paint the bonfire with the lawn chairs that is on the right hand side, and I could add that gorgeous sunsetty sky into that landscape. So this would be one way that you could combine photos. You could take a reference from one photo and insert it into the other photo so that we are combining images and our image still has a focal area. We also want to make sure that we're thinking about cropping a photo. So I wanted to make a painting of a heron, great gray heron. So I looked on Morguefile and I found the photo at the top there. It's a great photo, and I could certainly paint it, but it isn't really about the heron because it also doesn't show that I understand the rule of thirds. The heron is right in the middle of a lot of background stuff. So my bird isn't going to stand out the way I want it to. So that bottom image, I cropped the image so that my bird is located on one of those 1/3 lines. So, and the grassy stuff at the bottom also is on a 1/3 line. So we can see that we understand the rule of thirds. We crop out a bunch of the background. We don't have to paint as much background stuff. The bird is definitely closer. So we've taken control of the photograph and we're making it be a better painting. I could then crop the image one more time and make it be more about the bird and less about the background altogether. So that final crop puts the bird at the third, puts the face of the bird at the third. I can totally see that I understand the rule of thirds and the importance of the rule of thirds for creating a good composition in my painting. And I have taken control of my reference photo and I have made it be a good composition for my project. So that is how you choose photos for making good paintings.